Many game developers like to put in little secrets and Easter eggs for their players to find. This way it gives them a nice surprise when they come across them in game. But nothing has really been as big as this. This is probably one of Taleworld's biggest secrets at the moment, and I don't actually know how many people know about this. I have spoken to a few of my friends and none of them knew about this previously. So hopefully this is going to be a really exciting video for you guys as well as we go through and find out the Mount & Blade Napoleonic Wars DLC single player. Now this all started when I was preparing for another video. This video was about the success of Mount & Blade Napoleonic Wars, which will be coming in the near future. But as I was researching it, I was looking through the internet and I saw a discussion page on Mount & Blade. Now this was a Steam's discussion talking about why does Mount & Blade Napoleonic Wars not have a single player? And that has always been an age-old question for the community, because it's something that I think most of us, if not all of us, would have loved to see. And then I saw one of the replies to it. Now this really spiked my interest because it went like this. The single player was in the works, but Paradox, the former publisher for the game, rushed Taleworlds to get the game out. Otherwise it would have had a single player centered around Napoleon and his battles throughout the West. Now I don't know about you, but seeing this really perked my interest and I had to find out more. In order to do so, I got going in the game files for Mount & Blade Napoleonic Wars, opening them up and seeing what I could find. Now the first thing I did find is something that I'm going to leave to the very last, since my jaw literally dropped when I heard it, and it really made me and spurred me on to make this video since it's an incredible find. But the first thing is finding some of the coding and script files. There is some scripts talking about the single player campaign. There's missions in different places. For example, we have Vienna, single player campaign Vienna. We also have single player campaign in Austerlitz, and underneath all this coding and stuff they have the map name. The first map name is called Vienna Bridge, the second map name is called Austerlitz. There's also another one called Dresden, so we have a Battle of Dresden sort of campaign mission, but there's Dresden 1 and Dresden 2, which kind of indicates there being a kind of two-part mission here. And there's also Camp Visit map. Now this is very interesting because it shows that I don't think we would ever be getting a sort of single player in the terms that Mount & Blade Warband was, the whole sandbox RPG type thing, going around creating your army and things like that. I think it would be way more set into different missions and going along the campaign of Napoleon himself, going into different scenarios and trying to win battles as they come. Now the Camp Visit one really did intrigue me a lot, because that is very similar to something that we would see in the Mount & Blade Warband campaign, having the towns and things that you go into. So I wanted to find out more about this Camp Visit map and the script saying MST Camp 1. So looking around, I looked into some of the units and troops and there are units and troops. First one is called Troop Camp Armourer Tailor. So this is some sort of tailor or armourer that you'll be able to visit in the camp. There's also Troop Camp Weaponsmith, Weapon Merchant. Troop Camp Horse Merchant, and also Troop Merchant's End. So it looks like within this camp you would have been able to go around, buy different things like you would be in the single player for Mount & Blade Warband, with different merchants and armourers around as well. There's also some scripts on the conversations which really did kind of reinforce this. The fact that this is a very much RPG type thing in the scenarios and different scenarios that we have to do. There's the conversations between you and of course these AI. There's companion talks, which we know companions are in the single player for Mount & Blade Warband. There's also town merchant talks, but all these things could have been within the normal Mount & Blade Warband. They just didn't take it out for Napoleonic Wars, which I do doubt, but that is also possible. But then I noticed there's a conversation with Camp Dweller talk, and that very much sparked my interest, since I keep talking about this camp, and in the maps there's a camp. And this is within the single player campaign for obviously Mount & Blade Napoleonic Wars in the files. So it looks like you're going to be able to go into the camp. You should have been able to go and talk to merchants, buy things, and of course talk to every single person there. There's also something that I think confirms this more than pretty much anything here, and this is talking about if you go into Mount & Blade modules, Napoleonic Wars, scene objective, there's a bit of a clue that there was going to be a single player campaign for this. And this is because there's a massive folder right at the top of everything, right at the top of all the scene objectives, called Single player. They didn't really try and hide that too well, I'm not gonna lie. Maybe they just left it in to see if people would actually find it. But in here we have all the maps we probably would have got. Here's seen single player Auster, which is probably Austerlich. We have Camp Austerlich, so there's obviously the mission of Austerlich where you play in different scenarios, and then there's a camp there that you can go to. There's also single player Camp Dresden, and of course the Dresden 1 and Dresden 2 maps. We also have the single player Olafsson Vienna Bridge, which was that Vienna Bridge mission file that we noticed at the start of the video. And of course we have single player scene 1, 2, 3 and 4, Sostenich, and of course Vienna again at the end of there. So these are all in the folders under the title of single player, which indicates quite broadly, I think, that this was going to be a very mission scenario based single player thing that they wanted to put in Mount & Blade Napoleonic Wars, where instead of having this massive open world RPG sort of thing you go around, you go between different missions. Maybe you progress up missions and you take certain points and you win battles, and in this there's different camps so you can go around and buy things and things like that. I think that would have been absolutely awesome, and I am devastated that they didn't put it back in. But what was that massive thing that I spoke about before? What was this main thing that wanted me to make this video? Well, ladies and gentlemen, prepare your ears for a story told by Napoleon himself.
I grow tired of this war. The march has been tolerable, but the past few days were difficult, and I am only now recovering from an illness. Blast, the climate is terrible. Scorching hot days, cold nights, dry air. There are no more Russian peasants to be seen. They've burned their houses and fled, leaving little to sustain us on the long march towards Moscow. Our men grow tired as well. For too long they have been biting at the heels of a fleeing enemy. But they are cheerful that the march is nearing its end, and gladly meet the coming battle. We call the Russians cowards, and imagine a swift victory, that we may return to the arms of our loved ones. Our soldiers even ask permission to wear parade uniforms into the battle. Our hopes and weariness have blinded us. The men do not see that the most difficult challenge is yet to come. Meanwhile, the Russian soldiers have halted their retreat and instead are digging in for the final stand. Their preparations are covered by a great redoubt at Charadino. It is well away from their rear positions, which makes it a fine target. Marshal Devon has received orders to capture the redoubt as quickly as possible. I am to join the troops of General Companz in this attack, to ensure that everything goes as planned. But I am wary. Never before have I seen such fortifications. I have grown certain that these Russians are no cowards. They will retreat no further, but will defend their Moscow to the dying breath.
Now, as I was looking through the sound folders, I found this narrator. It is under the name of Mission Narrator 1, which is quite obviously a very story-driven campaign mission, as I think it's probably going to be narrated by Napoleon himself. It obviously is French, and it sounds like something that is coming from the mouth of Napoleon in his monologue. It's talking about the scorched earth tactics used by the Russians, and of course this was the invasion of Russia that the French did. It's talking about how the Russians burned all their things so the French couldn't live off the land. That's what happened. They used scorched earth tactics, which obviously made the French have to rely on imports and things like that coming on their supply lines. Now, it's also talking about a setup for one of these missions. I suggest this is going to be the very first one, since obviously we have a narrator here. We haven't had any narrators from any of the other missions, and of course it's called Mission 1. Maybe this is just because they deleted the Mission 2, 3, 4 and all the other ones before, the narrations for that, or maybe they hadn't done them yet, since obviously they never completed this. But I think this might be preparing for the Battle of Borodino. Now, this is just at a guess because, you know, I don't have any confirmation, but it does sound like the Battle of Borodino, which was probably one of the biggest and bloodiest fights in the Napoleonic Wars between the French and the Russians at that time, where the Russians had pulled back constantly as the French were moving through Russia. The Russians moved back, burning all their towns and cities completely. And then Russia decided to finally make their stand, where they dug in and decided that this was where they were going to fight the French in a head-to-head battle. Now, unfortunately for the Russians, they inevitably lost the battle, but both sides suffered huge casualties. And then after that, obviously, we all know that when France were like, we can't be bothered here, we got to get out of here. On the way back, I think they ended up coming out with like 28,000 men from the 250,000 that Napoleon took into Russia. So they lost a lot to the harsh winters on the way out, but that was a very big bloody battle, and maybe that was something that they were preparing to put in to this single player campaign. Now personally, I am extremely excited by this, but at the same time somewhat disappointed. We all know Mount and Blade is one of those series that seems to be perfection in terms of the developing for it. They don't want to bring out Bannerlord at this moment because they want to get the game that everybody loves. And maybe this is one of the reasons why. They brought out Mount and Blade Napoleonic Wars before it was finished. If this guy was right who replied to the discussions talking about how Paradox tried to force them to get it out right now instead of when it was finished, then maybe that's why Tailwoods wanted to take their time with Bannerlord, because they don't have the pressures of another publisher. They don't have Paradox Interactive breathing down their neck saying get this game out now, otherwise you're not really going to get the funding at all for it, and we're not going to publish your game. I think this is extremely interesting, since Mount and Blade Napoleonic Wars is a great DLC, it's extremely successful, and I'm working on a standalone video for that later on. But it could have been better. It really proves that Tailwoods are the sort of developers that put extreme amounts of efforts into their games, and the fact that Napoleonic Wars was a multiplayer only DLC had nothing to do with Tailwoods. Now of course this is me going off the reply from the discussions, but it was to do with another publisher forcing them to get it out, and I think that's really sad that we didn't see the game that Tailwoods wanted us to see, and this could be a massive reason why Bannerlord is being delayed so much. They want us to finally see a game that is perfect in their eyes. They want us to have the game that they want us to see, not what a standalone or other publisher wants us to see. But thank you guys for watching this. I really hope you enjoyed this video. This was one of my favourite videos to make, just researching it, and it really made me happy finding all this stuff in Mount and Blade Napoleonic Wars, and I can't wait to see if I can find anything else out in the future. But until then, I will see you in the next one.